I've played a lot of NES games, and most of the time I have them loose. They just sit on the shelf horizontally or vertically, and outside of a label, that's the most that I see. But for people in the 80s and the early 90s, game boxes were the potential make and break. It was the first thing you saw, and when push came to shove, it may have directly impacted your purchasing decision or the decision of your parents. There are games with badass box art, and inversely, there are games with horrible box art. And today, I'm going to name my top 10 worst NES box arts out there. Now, I will say I sat through a Google Drive that contained all licensed titles on the NES. I'm not going to bother with unlicensed or those weird Aladdin deck enhancer mistakes, just official licensed games. Let's begin. Narc, a game created by Eugene Jarvis. You know that guy? He was the dude who worked for Williams Entertainment and was responsible for some of the most impactful and fun Williams arcade titles of the era. Think of Robotron 2084, Defender, the entire Cruisin' series, or a personal favorite of mine, Smash TV. But Narc was one of those that I didn't play for a while, and then one day I did, and it's kinda hit or miss. Our whole objective is to arrest or kill crack addicts, take their money and their drugs, and eventually find Mr. Big. And no, not the band. We aren't going down the street killing in the name of justice to find Billy Sheehan and his cocaine-laden bass. But to be honest, the game would probably be more interesting if that was the case. As with most arcade games of the era, it was ported, but putting it on the NES, it was kind of dumb if you ask me. Nintendo had quite a few rules when it came to censorship. You couldn't mention alcohol, drugs, sex, or Jesus! And Narc, as a word, directly aligns with drugs. And even though Rare was adamant about it being an anti-drug game, Nintendo yanked all of the drug references. So instead, we got man in motorcycle gear shooting people down in the street the game. The box art is stupid too. If you remember in the arcades, Narc was spelled in big bold letters with a splash of blood across it. But again, Nintendo censorship. So what do? We turn it yellow to look like someone took a hot piss across the words. And let me tell you, this NES port, I've played it, and this is a proper representation, 100%. This is a relatively obscure game. Most of you probably haven't heard about it, and those who did, it was likely through Nintendo Power. The whole game involves us playing as Henry Morton Stanley, exploring the jungles when his professor gets kidnapped by African tribesmen. So we have to explore the jungles of Africa to find him. Which, you know, based on principle sounds pretty normal, until you realize just how fucking inundated these jungles are with assholes. You'll see spitting cobras, spitting jaguars, spitting tigers, oversized spiders, comically large beetles, massive bees, aggressive slugs, and hey, oh by the way, bad guys. To be honest, seeing bad guys was a reprieve until you realize that they're just lobbing spears at you like Shao Kahn. Fucking racist game developers. Anyway, the box itself stems from that era where people wanted to put real people on the front cover, which is fine if you know what you're doing. But that didn't translate well. We see Stanley hiding behind a bush. He kind of looks like the AVGN, but his eyes have been digitally colored in. It's just a dot on there. Look really close. It's weird and unsettling. I don't like it. Ew. Not to be confused with the city in Germany, Worm is a game created by Cyclone System that could not for the life of it decide what it wanted to be. It's a big ol' mishmash of buffoonery! Sometimes it's a first-person rail shooter, sometimes it's a Metroidvania, sometimes it's a horizontal shooter platformer. Honestly, between me and you, it doesn't look that bad. From an art direction, it did kind of stand out, but it was so eccentric, so different. And I think that's why it kind of wasn't popular. It was also published by Asmik Ace, who historically were huge on just weird fucking games. LSD Dream Emulator is the one that comes to mind for me. You know, the $800 art project that was released only in Japan, based on some incredibly messed up dreams that a guy put in a journal? Yeah, that was Asmik. Now, the game takes place in 1999, where these explorers take a special vehicle, the Worm, which is never mentioned anywhere outside of the manual. We dig down in the earth doing research, and through exploring, we find out about two races that were lost to time. And oh, what a coincidence, they happen to be having a good old-fashioned war. The box art is what confused me, though. The artwork pops, but the faces are kind of blurry, and the lady has spaghetti hair. It's just not for me. I get that they tried hard, but I feel like they tried too hard, and they fell kind of short. Likely one of the most expensive games on today's list, Panic Restaurant is a late-era NES release from EIM, and for the price point of a low $600, you would expect it to be fun, right? Depends on the person. We play as Chef Cookie, and we have to go through our own restaurant dealing with nonsense because our restaurant has been cursed by another chef named O'Dove, a play on hors d'oeuvre. We beat the hell out of random food items with kitchen utensils for 6 whole levels, and then it's done. Congrats! You just paid $100 per level. Now the game itself, it's whatever, it's a simple game, but to me the box art reminds me of a very important time in American history. Do you remember when people discovered the mystical powers of snorting bath salts, and people were just going on interstellar trips of bullshit to the moon and back because they're fucking idiots? That's what the front cover reminds me of. Just a drug-fueled nightmare of this guy running around perceiving his food as being alive. Now in Europe, it looks like this. So I have no idea why they decided to go this direction, but they did, and to me, it's it's so unsettling. Palamedes is an interesting game. Think of dice matching, but also poker hands. That's how it was described to me by one of the folks who commented on the 10 NES Best Puzzle Games episode. Palamedes almost made the list, and I'd venture to say it is an honorable mention for that. It's a solid puzzle game, you just need to know how to play it because it gets mean really quickly. All there is to it is match dice, clear them out, get bonus points. But you wouldn't know that from the box. We see the dice with humanoid features smashing some kid's head downwards while he has this big-ass rictus grin. It's gross. You remember glamour shots? There was a whole era of people with cringy and awkward portraits of their family. My favorite is the one with 2 kids next to each other and the dad crudely edited in looking the other way. That was a time to be alive. It's funny too because people were really proud of those pictures. They were on the mantle, on the wall. It's a product of its time, and I'm kind of glad that it went away because it's creepy as fuck. But I never thought I'd see a weird glamour shot in the vein of the era on the NES, but I did with Ghost Lion. Now what's Ghost Lion? It's an RPG. In Japan, it's known as White Lion Densetsu Pyramid no Kanada ni, or White Lion Legend Beyond the Pyramid. It was released by Kimco, who, if you've seen my previous videos, you know I'm not a huge fan of. And we play as Maria, who fights other people using spirit animals, and we level up by way of our level, courage, and dream, aka hope, HP, and MP. And we do that, check this out, by finding treasure chests. It's a pretty mid game, but the artwork, it's a glamour shot of Maria with a lion. That's it. Ghost Lion coming to a store near you. Electronic Arts Skate or Die series has often led to me believing that death is a superior option to video gaming. It's a very run-of-the-mill, overcomplicated way to enjoy skateboarding, and believe it or not, there were 5 games in this franchise. I've only ever played 3 of them. The last 2 of them were Game Boy exclusives, and they play exactly as you would expect them to. But in the early years of the Commodore 64, apparently this was one of the hottest games out there if you didn't want to go outside and actually skateboard, so its mild success led to a NES port, and inevitably led to my disappointment. Full circle, huh? The first game has a very late 80s, early 90s vibe to it. The second game features a kid at the mall, likely about to fall to his death. So again, the question of skate or die, it kind of gets answered here. By the way, that skater is Jeff Whitehead, the guy in Leviathan, the black metal band. He was a huge fan of skating and ended up on the cover of an NES game. That's a way to become culturally relevant. Skate or Die 2 is kind of different though. It's a side-scroller and we just embrace the counterculture by shooting people with a paintball gun or throwing fireworks at them like domestic terrorists, but hey, some people like this. I'm not really a fan. Before we continue, I do want to say that we are currently working on a major milestone of 8,000 subscribers. We are exceptionally close, so if you like what you see here, feel free to join us. Once we reach the milestone together, I'll make a special video of the community's choice. Let's get back to the disappointment. Remember Bobble? We talk a lot about it. It's been in a few lists that I've done lately, and for the most part, it's a wonderful game, truly wonderful. I have nothing but wonderful memories about this game. But Bobble as a franchise has tons of games under its belt. For the most part, it was a cash cow for Taito, especially during the 80s and the early 90s. Most people know Bubble Bobble 1 and Bubble Bobble 2, with the latter being one of those late-era NES releases that cost a lot of money, but the real second game in the franchise is a little bit different. It's known as Rainbow Islands. Now, for all intents and purposes, the characters we play as are the dragons, Bobloon and Bubbloon, or Bub and Bob, in their human forms. Instead of bubbles, we throw rainbows, which is still cool, and oh, by the way, it still has that convoluted ending system. Yeah. If you haven't checked out my top 10 worst NES endings episode, I'll link it down below and at the end of this video. While the game is cute and fun, the box art is lazy as lazy can be. And between me and you, it reminds me of the art you would find in Highlights magazine. You know, the ones that you'd find in the dentist or the doctor's office where some megachode douchebag kid had circled all of the items in the scavenger hunt, in pen, mind you, thus rendering the magazine useless to any competent child of the 90s? Yeah, good times. You know, this is gonna sound weird, but I was never actually a huge fan of Indiana Jones. My choice of consuming Harrison Ford through my eyeballs was Star Wars. But as a little caveat, George Lucas also created Indiana Jones, just in case you didn't know. Now, Indiana Jones had a few rough games that date all the way back to Raiders of the Lost Ark for the 2600, which is a weird game because to my knowledge it's the only game I've experienced which requires you to use both controllers. And as time went on, none of the games really mattered to me at all, until the point-and-click games. Those were awesome. After 3 successful movies, Raiders of the Lost Ark, Temple of Doom, and The Last Crusade, there was a TV spin-off called The Young Indiana Jones Chronicles, which served as a backstory to everything that Indiana Jones was and never would be. The youngest version of Indy was played by Corey Carrier, the young adult version was Sean Patrick Flannery, and yeah, it's a cool show, it really expanded the lore. But in 1992, Chris Gray Enterprises decided to pop out a game. The box art alone, it's just lazy. It's the show's logo, cool, with a picture of Sean Patrick Flannery running away, looking like he needs to take a massive emergency shit and it's prairie dogging and he has nowhere to go. We all know where this is going, and for anyone who cares about NES history, you already knew this was coming. To me, box art is like the Force, you know? You got the Jedi, you got the Sith, both of which are absurd if you look too hard into it. The Jedi? Phalanx on the Super Nintendo, just a guy picking a banjo. That's a horizontal shooter, by the way. But the Sith? Mega Man on the NES. Now, before I show you this, I want to let it be known that we do know what Mega Man looks like in the game. The Japanese release, which came out first, did a fine job of giving us an idea of the artistic direction of Mega Man. Short guy going up against gimmicky enemies. Europe? They got a pretty damn good looking Mega Man. Look at this. Well defined, modern artwork. Interesting. So what did we get in America? This! This is what we got. Let's take a look at what's going on. Let's dissect this. He's missing an eye. He's wearing what I can only describe as a Spirit Halloween costume. It appears that he has 2 left legs. Oh, and he's got a gun. The funny thing is, the only thing that makes sense for this box art is the background. And that stuff's out of view. The thing that shouldn't be the main focus. At least it attempts to cover some of the levels that we'll go through. Other than that, this is probably the hallmark of shitty NES boxes, but I do feel there are some that are more frustrating to me on a spiritual level. This is a racing game, one that I actually haven't taken the time to play. I'm aware of it because it was made by Winkysoft, a company you probably only know if you cared about the Super Robot Wars franchise. And to me, this is the 8-bit version of Gran Turismo. Why? Because cartooning is the central element of it. That's what the BTW in the name represents, built to win. We start off as a guy with no experience, and we piecemeal parts of the car, slowly making the meanest machine to ever drive on public roadways. That's right, no racetracks. We're on the city streets, meaning we're contending with civilian cars while speeding around. The game isn't horrible, but the box art is a sight to behold. I honestly don't know what the design aesthetic really was for this one. A horrible gradient of pink to blue with what I can only describe as a pack of zebra gum left out on the interstate and ran over 4,000 times. It's like the printer got stuck and just had a CYMK jizz fest. It's not visually appealing at all. Also, fun fact, you start off driving a Mini Cooper. The F1 car is at the end of the game, so I don't know why they just didn't call the game Fast Car Build to Win, because it would have made more sense, but what do I know? I'm just a boy. You know, I shouldn't have expected much from a game that revolves around a sentient children's toy, but in some way I did, and I hate that. Barbie is a cultural phenomenon, one that still thrives to this day. It was created by Ruth Handler, and almost every instance of Barbie was used in an effort to draw female attention towards specific things, and in the case of the NES game, it was only rationally created to pull young ladies into playing the NES, which to my knowledge was one of the few games that did, at least in that capacity. It's a platformer with a rigid-ass Barbie bebopping down the stages through 3 worlds, with our whole objective being to find these accessories so that we can meet up with Ken at the ball, and in the game. But it was made by Imagineering, which were a bunch of baboons flinging shit when it came time to make games, and their publisher wasn't that much better. High-Tech Expressions was a sinking ship the minute they came into the industry. They focused on wholesome educational or childlike experiences, and gamers really didn't care about it. Why would they? But the box art is simple, and it's simple in a way that infuriates me. They took a Barbie, took a picture of it, and that's the box. I mean, kudos to some capacity because it does pop in the way that a young girl might want to see it and go, "Oh wow, Barbie, my own Barbie game, wow, can I have it?" It's one of the few games that were for girls, so props, but damn man, do a little bit better. And that's it for today's episode. What did you think about this list? Are there any NES box arts that you find to be absolutely dreadful? Feel free to let us know down in the comments below. This is a great opportunity to share a laugh and remember those horrible mistakes in video game marketing. By the way, if you made it to the end of this episode, you're already home in our community. We're a group of individuals who love remembering a time when life was just a little bit easier to live, and if that's something you align with, feel free to join us. Finally, the single most important thing you could do for me is to hit that thumbs up button, as it directly affects the visibility of the videos and the projects that I work on every single day. As always, from my family to your family, good energy, good vibes. Fortefyre out.